All right. So thank you for joining me on this college admission secret to success part 1 of 2. We've got a lot of material to cover. I'm hoping I don't run out of oxygen and the ability to get through it all, but there's a lot to cover. So we wanted to do it in one part. It's near impossible. There's so much to cover, so much good information I want to pass on to you guys. So we wanted to divide it up into 2 parts. I'm going to talk to you about what we're going to get in the second part. But in the meantime, let's get busy. All right. Here's a bit of my own background so that we're on the same page. I studied internationally in a high school, a British high school. I then came and went to UCSB myself. So I applied, went to UCSB. It was a really, really tricky admissions process because I had a really poor SAT. I took it 3 times and only progressively better each time, but it was definitely on the difficult side for me. I then basically transferred to UCLA and eventually graduated top of my class at UCLA. Eventually, I went to go to law school at Berkeley Law, where afterwards I started Right Track. In the middle of Berkeley, I went to Cambridge to do my master's in international relations. And then I went to Harvard about 10 years after law school to pursue my master's in public administration after having worked in the US government as an international lawyer for a number of years. So, which is where this picture is taken. So that's a bit of my own background. But as I said, I struggled with the SAT, didn't do well. I struggled with the LSAT, didn't do well. I struggled with the GRE, didn't do well, but I was able to get into what are ranked typically in the top 10, top 20 schools, period, internationally. All right. Now, a lot of the material that we're going to be covering today comes from the College Admissions Mastery course. You can Google this, or you can find it just by typing www.mastery or collegeadmissionsmasterycourse.com. And you'll pretty much see this course by participating in both sessions of this workshop series. You'll have a chance to win this course for free. And if you participate in both parts of the course, you'll also get the mastery checklist for free. That's on the house. We want to provide that to you. So make sure to attend both parts and make sure to share this with the people so that they can also attend. All right. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, in terms of college admissions, there are so many people that apply to college, right? And you really want to be able to stick out. So a lot of our clients come to us as rising seniors. Their whole application's already complete. There really is no more space for them to do anything at this point. So they come to us and say, hey, I don't know how to answer some of these questions. I don't even know where to start. We can help you. But more importantly is if you're a rising junior or a rising sophomore, basically your last 2 years or last year or last 3 years of college, this is really where it is exceptionally important for you to start preparing and building your profile. So if you're already a rising senior, hang tight. You can learn something from this. If you're a rising junior, rising sophomore, even rising freshman, definitely perk up because this is super important for you. All right. In terms of college, let's think about the 5 C's. I want you to keep these 5 C's in mind, okay? Very, very important. In terms of the 5 C's, I want you to think about these are the things that colleges look for in a candidate. Number 1, and overall, as an overview, I want you to think about IQ versus EQ. IQ being sheer raw intelligence, EQ being emotional intelligence. How do you work with people? How well do you know yourself? How well do you interact with others? How do you lead? How do you act as a team member, right? How compassionate are you, right? How empathetic are you? These are all very, very key components of what schools are going to be looking for in candidates. And so to that avail, right there, we've got, let's start with the first one, collaborative. So they're looking for people who have strong teamwork and leadership skills. Super, super important. Strong teamwork and leadership skills, okay? Things that really can allow you to interact well. That's all EQ, okay? So you want to highlight those factors in your resume, in what you do, in the activities section of the common application, in your interview, is how well you get along with others. We've got creativity. Underrated, but super important because it really, again, talks about EQ and IQ, how you come at problems from a multitude of perspectives. What skills, what talents do you bring to the graduating class or to the incoming class in terms of how you're going to add value to that community? What do you bring? What value do you bring? And how do you think about things from a creative, multifaceted perspective? Super, super important. Compassionate, again, empathy, compassion, which you exhibit through volunteer and community service. How do you do that? What do you do to really kind of showcase those different qualities as an individual? And what have you done in terms of the things that you've been doing in high school to exhibit compassion, as well as curiosity? What passions do you have? What ways do you satiate intellectual desire, right? And look, in this day and age, almost everything is Googleable. Now everything is ChatGPT-able, right? So you could use AI to discover and learn about infinite possibilities. That's important, and they want to know that you're bringing people on, that they're bringing people on board that have a strong sense of curiosity. That's very, very important to the school. Is that there's someone who is curious, who wants to consistently and continuously learn about things that are not just their areas of strength, but things are outside the areas of strength, so that they have general knowledge. All right. And finally, how do you show commitment? That you have a strong work ethic and that you're driven. That's very, very important. So you want to show where you've worked somewhere, where you've been a leader in an organization, that you've stuck it out to the good and the bad and succeeded, because they want to see that you are driven. They don't want you to start school at their university and then bail out after, a semester or a year or two. Obviously, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg and you came up with Facebook, then they want you to stick it out all the way to the end. All right. These are some key things I want you to think about in terms of the 5 C's, and you should be exhibiting those in everything you do as it pertains to your applications and applying to colleges. Collaborative, creative, compassionate, curious, and committed. Okay? Those 5 core qualities. All right. Now that we talked about those core qualities, how do you actually exhibit it? Okay? And so when you exhibit it, when you exhibit it, you want to be thinking about your story. So how do you create and craft the story that you're going to be writing about? How are you going to be thinking about these things, about these core 5 qualities that you can see? And you want to basically exhibit them by thinking about these factors. How do you create your story? Think about these factors, okay? Be proactive about life. Don't just wait for it to happen, okay? Make life experiences. If you sit at home and all you're doing is gaming and you're not going out there into the real world, you're missing things. You're missing life opportunities that could otherwise make you more exciting, more interesting for that school, okay? So be proactive about life. Take on challenges, right? And take on those challenges by challenging your core beliefs, right? Be open-minded. You may have a certain religious disposition, but you start learning about other religions and you're like, that really got me thinking in ways I never thought about before. Take risks that allow you to succeed and learn from the failures. Very, very important. So take risks, face challenges, set goals for yourself, accomplish those goals, right? Whether it's a marathon, whether it's learning a language, whatever it may be, very, very important to kind of be able to embody those key qualities in terms of the goals you set and accomplish. Be vulnerable, right? Be vulnerable. Be ready to be vulnerable personally, academically, socially, right? So that you can learn from that experience. Read, listen to audibles, do podcast, listen to podcasts. Again, that goes back to the aspect of curiosity, vulnerability, compassion, goals and accomplishments, committed, right? Commitment. Take risks, challenges, right? That's going to lead into a sense of compassion and commitment in terms of these core qualities, right? Be proactive about life, right? That comes into probably being curious, right? We also talk setting goals also has something to do with collaboration. If you're setting those goals with someone else, being creative, right? That's a category in and of itself that you want to be thinking about. Develop those hobbies, especially ones that tap into and really make you unique, okay? That's very, very important. Thinking about leadership and creativity, okay? That's also very important because that talks into collaboration, right? Think about mentorship. That really, again, talks about that collaborative spirit, working with people and helping, being a mentee and being a mentor, socializing, developing deep bonds with coaches and teachers and classmates, not just your family, but really learning and thinking out of the box by learning from others. By embracing and understanding these core qualities or these core components that fit into what the colleges look for, these actually allow you to exhibit it. Let me do this one more time with you in another aspect. If we tell you these is how you can really allow these things to shine, here's where you can actually live them. Okay? Let's take a moment, just pause here and just look at this. Okay? And guys, any questions, please feel free to ask. We can make this as interactive as possible. So when we tell you here to really show a sense of curiosity, a passion, and intellect, right? Here is where you do it. In academics, take on advanced courses, read books, be curious, right? Math, science, go out of the box in areas that you know are going to be very, very important in terms of what schools look for. Embrace life experiences, right? We talked a little bit about that. The challenges faced, hardships overcome. This is definitely going to come up in your application essays. So you have to basically create and seed those experiences. If you don't embrace those life challenges and those hardships faced, in the end of the day, you're going to end up in a situation when they ask you, how have you overcome a difficulty, a hardship? You're not going to know how to answer that question because you're not going to have learned about digging deep and overcoming certain aspects. In summer activities, we tell you, maximize your summer activities. This summer, next summer, right? Think about volunteering, taking summer camp, doing a self-directed project, even taking classes, right? Just be active. Don't just sit in Netflix and chill, but be proactive. We talked about being proactive. Extracurriculars allow you to really flex that collaboration, student government, sports, right? So if we're talking about these are the core elements, here's the kind of qualities that showcase those elements. Here is how you actually live those elements, right? And that's spending time to live your story. And what I mean by living your story, I mean creating the life experiences that allow you to grow, which then you will use to actually answer those questions in your college applications. What a great way of thinking is that you're creating the experience that you're going to write about in your application. Okay, super, super important. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the essays themselves. We've got the volunteer activities, right? Which again, passion-directed projects, things like that. And then we've got internships, part-time jobs, things like that, that you should also shows a level of commitment, collaboration with others, curiosity to learn about different things. So those are ways of exhibiting those key qualities, okay? So again, all three of those components come together to tell you what the schools look for, how you can essentially, what you should be thinking about each one of those components, and then how to actually actualize them in terms of living your story, all right? So we got a question here that says, how much extracurricular activity do you recommend to be admitted into the IVs? So super important question, but a very difficult one because there is no straight answer for this, Latoya. The idea here is that in terms of extracurricular activities, I always recommend doing 1, 2, or 3 activities where they are a mile deep and an inch wide versus a mile wide and an inch deep. And what I mean by that, I mean you want to really get into that organization, feel it, work with people, grow within it, really make a significant impact that could be measured, right? That is so important. And that's what schools look for. They want to see depth over breadth. They want to see that you did something really substantive, that you stuck it out to the good and the bad, rather than just 10 activities where you're just very superficial. So if you ask me how many activities or how much extracurricular activity, I would say enough to showcase key qualities such as collaboration, such as leadership and teamwork, such as curiosity, such as compassion. That's what you really want to showcase. So I would say pick maybe 2, max 3 activities and really dig into them to show where you've made significant impact. That's what will make for the best essays for schools, especially the IVs. Now, you've been putting all this time, you've been developing your profile, you've been putting all this effort, how do you capture it all? Well, you capture it all in your resume and then building lists, list after list after list. Just write it down. If you had a really great experience, write it down, write it down, write it down. Super important, right? Your extracurricular, summer activities, volunteer activities, professional experiences, academics, just list it all down in a Google Doc or whatever it is and keep adding to it. And then when it comes time for you to put together your activity section, you've got it right there. All these really comprehensive lists, you can do that, right? So that I think is very, very important in terms of gathering your data. Other ways to gather your data is I would advise, and we do this with all our clients through our college admissions assessment program, CAP, we do a SWOT analysis for you. And what that looks like is essentially your strengths, how we maximize them, the weaknesses in your application, how do we mitigate them, the opportunities, how we manage them, and the threats, how we minimize them, right? So these are very, very important aspects. And I would highly, highly recommend, right? You basically putting this together so that you are essentially getting a better opportunity for you to understand your candidacy as an applicant, okay? So I would definitely do a SWOT analysis of your background. Finally, in terms of gathering data, you can then start putting it into these spreadsheets. For example, when you're putting together, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in terms of selecting schools and so forth, you basically want to kind of gather that and put that in here in terms of saying, you know, oh, I want to apply to NYU. Why? Because I have this certain strength and this certain interest that really aligns well with that school. So that's where you can put it. But we're going to also talk a little bit more about selecting universities in a little bit. All right. Okay. Now we've talked about building your profile. Now let's talk about assembling your application material. Okay. Super important. So these are the key components of the law school, of the college application process. School major selection. So you want to figure out which school you want to apply to, what major you want to do at that school, or double majors or triple majors or major and minor, right? Talk about the common application a little bit. We're going to talk about school-specific essays and application questions. Talk about the resume. Talk about standardized testing, ACT, SAT. Sometimes schools don't even take the ACT, but a lot of schools are going back to taking the SAT. The letters of recommendation, financial aid, and then finally the college interview. Some of the stuff we're going to be covering in part 2 of this process, but in the meantime, we're going to be covering some of them on this webinar. Okay, so we spoke about picking the right school or picking the school and major. So here's what I want you to think about. Picking the right university, what you should be thinking about. I want you to start thinking about, location, in terms of, is it a city like NYU or a rural environment like Cornell? Is it close from home or far from home? Is that a big deal for you? Do you want to be away from your parents or close to them, right? Is it going to be a hot environment, a cold environment? You're going to be there for 4 years. So you want to know, are you going to be in Arizona where it's going to be hot, or are you going to be in Buffalo where you're going to freeze, right? These are just in terms of examples in America. Liberal arts, right, which are typically smaller schools that are more humanities focused, or major big universities like state universities, private or public, right? Like University of Texas A&M is a major, huge university. So you want to think about size, right? You want to think about academic programs, major level of competition, right? How does that work? Top 10 program or mid-tier program? Again, you may not have the chance to think about that because reputation is going to factor into your scores, but again, something to consider. Resources, do they have great libraries, research opportunities, right? What is the tuition? Is it super expensive? Do they have good financial aid opportunities, right? Like schools like Princeton almost pay for most of their undergraduates and provide incredibly generous scholarships. But obviously, it's super hard to get in, right? Some lower ranked schools who really want you because you have an excellent SAT and GPA and an application may be willing to pay a lot. So you want to consider that. Campus vibe. What's the diversity look like? Do they have sports program? Do they have international students? Do they have a Greek system like fraternities and sororities, right? These are all factors to kind of consider there. The network, locally and internationally. Let's say you want to work in New York, but you're doing your undergrad at USF, University of San Francisco. Is that the right place to be? or should you go to Fordham in New York if you really want to be there in terms of the network, right? Faculty, how accessible are they? How much expertise do they have in areas that you're interested in? What about their qualifications, right? And then finally, talk about like the resources on campus, such as the job placement and career office. A lot of schools suffer from this and are not able to really kind of live up to it in terms of placing you. That's why it's really important on you to figure out exactly how to get yourself in the best position possible for a job and not just leave it to the school. Now, here's what not to do and what to avoid in selecting colleges. Relying on reputation and rank alone. You're going to go to Harvard or nothing else. Well, if you do that, you can end up in a situation where you don't get into Harvard and now you're sitting out the year trying to figure out what you're going to do, or go to community college, which you may not want to have done initially had you not just put all your eggs in that Harvard basket, all right? Not visiting or researching the campus, kind of going in blindfold, you get there and you're like, damn, what the hell was I thinking? This place sucks. And then you have a miserable time. Applying because a certain major or a professor only, and that's a problem because that professor can quit, transfer to schools, resign, all kinds of things can happen. So you don't want to go just for one professor or one major, whereby at some point you decide to switch majors, go from biology to like finance, and then you're like, man, this school has a horrible finance program, and I only came here for the biology or whatever it was. Okay. Attending for financial aid only. If you get into Harvard and you get zero cash, and you get into, I don't know, let's say McGeorge up in near Sacramento for the full ride and then some, go to Harvard, because you're going to have a hell of a lot of better opportunities in your life, infinitely better than if you go to a school that's ranked in the top 150 like McGeorge or something. So you want to be thinking about that, is that don't just go because of financial aid only. Also because you can get financial aid later on. And I'll talk to you about how during undergrad, I was able to secure enough funding to graduate with a profit because I had good grades, and I just went to the honors department and they gave me scholarships that I initially didn't even know about when I was applying, but I got later on in my final year. All right. Following friends and family, I don't think that's a good move because it may have worked for them, but that school may not align with who you are. You are not your friend or family. Typically you have your own personality and you want to carve your own path. And then not diversifying in terms of reach, target, and safety schools. And here, I'm going to kind of showcase this kind of graph for you that we put together. You've got the number of applications that you should apply to versus the chances of acceptance right there from 0 to 100. So you should be thinking about applying to and diversifying reach schools. The bulk of your applications should be target schools, high targets, and low targets. And then you've got the safety schools, right? Reach schools are your typical for almost everyone across the board. But of course, if you've got a poor GPA, maybe your reach schools change. All of this changes. But typically your reaches are your Harvards, Yales, Dukes, Stanfords, Caltechs, MIT, right? Are your reach schools. Your target schools could be high targets like UCLA, USC, Berkeley, Michigan, Virginia, right? Vanderbilt. Your low targets could be like maybe George Washington, something like Emory, but I think actually Emory's ranked pretty high. Rice, some of the schools that are in the top 30, for example. And then you've got the safety schools, which are going to be some of your state schools that are not super highly ranked. And those schools, essentially, you want to apply to maybe 5 of those, 10 targets and 5 reaches. If that's too much, then divide that by half. 3 reaches, 5 targets, 3 safeties, or 2 safeties, right? But if you will say, hey, I'm not going to go to school if I'm going to be applying and only going to a safety, I'd rather go to community college and then go to and transfer to a better school. And that's always an option as well. All right. When you go to the school, I want you to ask certain questions. Look at and check out the class sizes, the lecture sizes. Are they big? Are they just right? Are they too small? Right? What's the residence life? What's the student housing look like? Do they have student groups that match yours? Again, this is not a be all end all, because even if you don't have a student group there, you can create your own student group based on your own interests that other people may share, right? What's the academic vibe on campus feel like? What's the social vibe feel like? What's the area feel like? Like, again, I went to UCLA, so Westwood Village. Did I like it? Did I not like it? Did I like Westwood in general? Did I like being that part of Los Angeles? What are the job opportunities? What's the cost of living? Los Angeles is expensive, but there's a lot of job opportunities. So that was important to me. Okay. When you visit the campus, these are some things to definitely consider. Okay. Schedule a visit with the school if it's in session. Reach out and ask questions and research it, right? Research as much as you can in areas that are not just on their website, but check out their social media accounts, check out the student paper, stuff like that to really get a good sense of what the school is all about. Take an official tour on campus or explore it on your own. See residential life. We talked about what the residential life looks like, the dorms, off-campus housing. Be a student and audit a class. Have a meal in the mess hall, right, in the student, in the cafeteria. Attend extracurricular events like a game or something like that, right? Spend the night in the city just to see how it feels to be in that part of Los Angeles. Engage with students, faculty, student groups, alum. Just get to know from the students' perspective and from these people's perspective what their experience was like on campus. That's super important because they can kind of pull back the curtain and tell you. But again, don't hold everyone to their word is magic because, again, each person is different. Each time they went to the school is different, okay? And don't make an immediate judgment. Exactly like I said, even if you talk to a student, they say it sucked. Well, wait a second. Go check it out yourself, talk to another student, and then make your own decision. And remember, take down people's names that you interacted with on and off campus and reference that in your application material because it shows that you were there. Remember the date, who you spoke with, what classes you attended, and stuff like that that you can then talk about while you're in your applications when that time comes. All right? Let me know if you have any questions on any of this, but this is really how you maximize visiting a campus. And you definitely should do it. And for those parents out there who are watching this, I would definitely recommend doing student campus tours sooner rather than later, because I think that's very, very important for you to really understand what that campus is all about and do it. I think it really brings a nice bond between parents and their child when they go out together and check out different universities, especially this one, my alma mater, UCLA. That's Royce Hall right there. All right. Now, how do you select the ideal major? Well, first of all, I want to quickly tell you, there is no magic bullet. 1 in 3 students change their major at least once during college. I added a minor to my major. So, you have opportunities there. But think about what are your areas of passion, right? What do you love to do the most? What do you find fun to study, which other people find a chore, right? Or that you're interested in, other people are just like, oh, hell no, I hate this area, right? But you just find it fun. You naturally gravitate to it. You naturally read up on it, right? That's a very important factor. For me, I loved history. I loved memorizing dates. I loved thinking about the linkages between one event and another event in different parts of the world. And so therefore, I applied as a history major. And because I ended up going to law school, I got a great GPA out of history, and it allowed me to get into one of my favorite law schools, top law schools. Think about what you want to do down the road. Obviously, that's very important. If you want to do med school, if you want to do accounting, if you want to do engineering, you're going to have to take on certain attributes. Maybe accounting a little bit less so because you can do a CPA later in your life. I don't think you have to be a major, but obviously you have to do pre-med courses. Even then, if you don't do pre-med courses, you can take a year or two off and do all your pre-med after you graduate. But typically, you want to be thinking about that. So how do you prepare for your career in terms of what you want to study? Obviously, people pivot. As I said, I was a history major and a poli-sci minor, ended up going to law school, and now I do legal work and entrepreneurship. Earning potential. Some people don't care about how much they earn. Maybe they've got a nest egg. Maybe their parents are giving them a hell of a trust. Maybe they just don't care about making money and want to live a better life. They want to give back to society. So that's a factor. Are financial earnings a huge motivator for your intended career? Some people it is. Some people it's not. Sometimes job security is. Some it's not. But speaking of job security, I want you to think about that. And I write about this in the College Admissions Mastery course about future-proofing and AI. Very, very important factor because a lot of jobs are being made redundant. A lot of people feel unprepared. And so you want to pick a career path that is a little bit impervious to that massive change that we're seeing right now in terms of AI in the world. All right. Just a quick note for those who are undecided, you can enter schools. I don't usually recommend it. I always recommend that if you can write a whole life experience around a specific major, it makes for much better application materials than if you just say I'm undecided and then end up not being able to put together an application that really allows you to stand out. Okay, so I'm not a huge fan of undecided unless you really have no choice, because you're good at 6 things, not because you're bad at all of them, but because you're good at so many things, and that's what you really want the school to know about. Otherwise, if you're bad at everything, pick one, the least of the bad things, and run with it. Because again, you want to showcase that you are committed, that you know what you want to do now and in the future as best as you possibly can. And then, as I said, you can do multiple minors, you can do multiple majors. I did a minor. That wasn't too different from the major. It just turned out that I was taking so many classes in poli-sci, I ended up just getting a minor in it. I will add this, if you are doing pre-med, I wouldn't advise you doing pre-med and, let's say, bio or physics. I would say do your pre-med core courses and do something a little bit outlandish to kind of showcase a different aspect of who you are, so that the schools doesn't think you're myopically focused, but that you're a unique, interesting, all-encompassing individual. So maybe doing something like Chicano studies and pre-med. You want to do medicine, but you also want to learn about your heritage and background. That looks a lot more appealing than somebody who just did pre-med and bio, and that's it. Especially if you do obviously well in your pre-med classes and you will do well in your MCATs, then that is going to be an important factor for you to kind of really showcase and distinguish yourself as an individual. All right. Quickly, I want to go through your resume. We talked about the resume earlier, right? In terms of a way of capturing everything. And here's where the category should be. Now, if you're doing the common application, they ask for an activity section, right? And so this is going to be broken into the activity section of the common application. If you're not applying to the common app, then you want to have a solid resume. And here's how you break it down. Education activities, right? And think about those activities that you did in the academic setting. You've got your professional experiences, right? Responsibilities, and always think about measurable results, not just giving them the responsibilities, but what you achieved, right? If you have professional experience. All right. Then you've got the volunteer experiences. Public service is very, very important because it emphasizes leadership and experience. And that goes back to what we were talking about, which is a sense of compassion and empathy, all right? Then you've got your skills and interests, and make those as unique as possible to you. Don't just say reading, running, writing, but talk to me about where have you run? Did you run cross country? Did you win any competitions? Reading, is there a specific genre of reading that you love to do, of books, of literature, right? Cooking, is there a specific type of food that you love to cook, right? And then you've got these other areas, publications, certificates and licenses, and speaking engagements, okay? These are all aspects of how you would structure the resume. Your education first, because you're applying to academic program. Your professional experience, if you have any. If you don't, put the volunteer above it. Extracurricular activities, interests and skills, and then any others that really pertain to you, okay? Licenses, certificates could be like CPR. It could be, I don't know, something that you did, maybe an online course that really is exciting, that can contribute to what you want to study, all right? Let me know again if you guys have any questions on any of this material. Okay, letters of recommendation. Here, we want to talk about that the letters of recommendation really provide a subjective assessment, okay, of who you are, all right? That's super important. It's a subjective assessment versus you. The school will obviously take your word for it, but they'd love to have someone else corroborate who you are, okay? You should be submitting these letters of rec 2 to 3 months, not submitting them, excuse me, requesting them. I keep saying submitting, requesting them 2 to 3 months before the due date to ensure the quality, time of submission, and out of respect and courtesy for the recommender. And who should you be asking? Obviously, this is an academic program that you're applying to, college. So you should be thinking about professors, teachers, counselors, above all else, academic. Then as a second letter, you could look into extracurriculars, such as club advisors, coaches, things like that. Then you've got your professors, supervisors, and mentors, people that are ranked above you, not someone who's at the same level as you, but above you that can really speak to who you are and how you've improved over time, right? Current students and alum, amazing, super important, especially if you're applying to a particular school, then this is very, very important for you. Thinking about the students and the alum as well. Very, very important. All right. Who not to ask? Don't ask a family or friend because it takes away from the veracity, from the credibility, because a family or friend will always write something nice to you and they want somebody who's going to be able to speak truthfully about you, not someone who doesn't want you to get hurt by having a bad letter of rec. Don't ask someone you're not 100% sure will have your back. That will give you a lukewarm or mediocre letter of recommendation. And don't choose a VIP like the principal of your high school over your teacher simply because they're the principal of the high school. Because if you don't know that principal very well versus the teacher, then you can end up getting a very generic letter versus someone that will be your best cheerleader and that will really, really support you. All right. Super important. When I applied, I obviously got letters from my teachers versus like getting letters from tutors, right? Which is just not going to cut it. All right. So I got, teachers versus the principal of the school, and then teachers over tutors when I could help it. But if couldn't get teachers, then I would get tutors. All right. Just something to think about. And when you ask them, follow up by an email, be polite, outline the deadline, provide any materials for them, resume, brag sheet, essentially just tells them, hey, I was in your class. These are the grades. I participated in this project. Please remember I did this, I did that, I did this, so that they have that top of mind when they put together their application. Once you're admitted, then send them a letter, an email to thank them for their support and having written the letter. It's just a good courtesy and it's a good protocol for you. All right. Let me know again if you have any questions on any of this. All right. Let's quickly talk about standardized testing. I broke it down by the different areas. So sections in the ACT, you've got English, math, reading, right? Science and optional essay. In the SATs, you got the reading, writing, language, math, and optional essay. Okay. SAT is definitely more popular across America than is the ACT. The ACT came about 10, 15, 20 years later than the SAT. And it provides yet another opportunity for students to see how they perform. Typically, people take ACTs do better than the SATs. But if you can do better, if you can take the SAT and do better, take the SAT. It's just better recognized and seen as I'm not going to say legitimate exam, but definitely a harder exam. So if you conquer it, it's definitely props for you. All right. It's long. It's about 3 hours, right? But so is the SAT because you got the time for the optional essay. It's both offered about 7 times a year, both around the same cost, but those prices may have changed. And you can go register at ACT by going to their website or the College Board for the SAT itself. Now, a lot of schools initially were obviously SAT mandatory. Then during COVID, it became SAT optional, test optional, and or not required. And now they're going from optional to required at a lot of the schools, including Harvard. So definitely don't underestimate the SAT. Study for it, get a tutor for it, put the time into it. This is single-handedly the best way you're going to be able to guarantee admission to a top school or a higher ranked school and potentially scholarships if you really crush the SAT. And what is crush? Getting probably a 1300 and above is going to be in the 85th to 99th percentile. All right. Again, let me know if there's any questions there. In terms of financial aid, let's think about financial aid in 4 key buckets. Okay. And then I'll tell you how I graduated debt-free and with a profit. All right. Free funds are typically grants, state and federal grants. I got a bunch of grants when I was applying to college. Family, obviously, if there's no strings attached. Local community organizations, again, if there's no strings attached. Funds with requirements, government funding that they may require certain grades and so forth to be met, and potentially repayment in some ways. Sometimes they will. Scholarships, again, may require that you maintain a certain GPA, which I think is important for them. So if you drop that GPA, boom, you can get your scholarship removed. Even an athletic scholarship is a good example, where if your GPA drops or you no longer participate in the athletic event, there's strings attached, you'll get that scholarship removed, right? Funds for repayment also, I think, is another opportunity for you to get funding, and know that, again, like I said, go into a much, if you have a choice between a really high ranked school and a low ranked school, and you're going to have to take out loans, do it, but don't overdo it by taking out tons of private loans simply to take out private loans more than you need, because you're going to have to repay it back, especially if it's unsubsidized, which is where you have to start paying back the interest rate the minute you take out that loan, versus subsidized, which I believe they defer it until 6 months after you graduate. Other things to consider is that even if you don't get funding, like in some cases, when I was an undergrad, I went to find other funding opportunities as a student. So you can do that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So you can work as a student. You can do summer activities as a student and get money, summer internships, and you can negotiate. So for example, if you get into UCLA or USC and UCLA gives you a certain amount of money, you can negotiate funding from USC, and UCLA until you reach a certain point and be able to get as much funding as possible. So definitely something to think about, that it doesn't end when you apply. While you're a student, you can also make money, you can earn money. There's many, many different ways to help pay your tuition off. For me personally, I graduated debt-free by doing in-school internships. So I worked sometimes as a student. I took summer jobs and got money working in summer jobs and saved money. Probably the best way was I went to the honors program. I had a really high GPA. I said, guys, you're not giving me any merit-based financial aid. All the aid I'm getting is grants. And so they gave me a binder. I read through the binder, found 4 or 5 scholarships that made sense, and applied to those scholarships, and I got 3 of them. And so I graduated with a profit in my last year of school. I paid off all my debt, graduated debt-free, and then had a little bit of extra money when I graduated. So I was able to take a little time off after graduation to figure out what I wanted to do. Also, be mindful of budgeting. Like, I lived on campus most of the time, which had subsidized housing, and then ended up living with a roommate in college in the same room. So we shared a room, and that helped us save a lot of money down the road as well. So we were very, very careful about budgeting in terms of financial. All right. Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground today in terms of this. We've talked about the schools. We mentioned a little bit about the Common App. Though, let me quickly kind of tell you, the Common App is formed in 2 parts. You get one essay that you have to fill out. And we'll talk, I believe, a little bit about that next time in terms of the questions they ask. And then you have the activity section you fill out. It goes out to about 1,000 different universities in the US. And it opens up, actually already opened up. So you should be all over the Common App. We've obviously worked with a ton of people with the Common App. And then after the Common App, we work on school-specific essays, which we're going to talk about, as I said, next week on the next webinar. We talked about the CV today. We talked about standardized testing, letters of recommendation, and financial aid. And I think it is important to note that 2/3 of U.S. college students receive financial aid. So it is possible. Do not, underestimate how you can get financial aid in different variants. And then on the next webinar, we'll talk about the college interview process itself. All right. So who are we? I'll tell you a little bit about us. These are areas where we have deep knowledge: engineering, health, social sciences, technology, finance, different areas where we've really excelled and help people get into these majors. All right. And these are just some of the majors for sure. And also, this is a little bit of a background of kind of who we are. 93% success rate getting students into top programs. When I say top, I mean top 75 college programs, not the top 5, because that would be near impossible to maintain that. Anybody tells you that, it's false. It's impossible to get into a top 5 or top 10 school with 93% success rate. There's just too many variables. But we definitely can, again, if you use that chart, reach, target, and safety schools, we definitely have an incredibly high success rate with that chart. We've represented students from 34 different countries over 16 years into 129 programs. Some of those we talked about right here. And then finally, one of the important factors I kind of want to mention here is the fact that we've been able to help students limit how much time they have to put into this, really streamlining the operation by up to 50%, in terms of saving them time to turn around the application materials when we work together with them. So I think that's something very, very important to kind of also know as well. in terms of that. So it reduces stress and increases your chances of admission in half the time. All right. This is just a sampling of my team of experts, phenomenal individuals. They've gone on to MIT. They've gone to Princeton, Harvard, University of Virginia. You know, I mean, like literally all the top schools. University of Chicago. So super accomplished, diverse, traveled a bunch, and have had incredible success and graduated top of their class in the different programs that they attended. All right. In part two, what we're going to discuss, so keep in tune with part two. We've got we'll be talking about developing and writing your story. Super important. Probably the most important thing that we're going to be talking about on this. Submissions process, graduating debt-free, which we kind of spoke about, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then success at college and much more. So make sure to tune into that. And finally, I'll leave you with this. If you hit us up in the next 24 hours, not only will you get 25% off of our mastery course that we've been using for this program, but also you'll get a free mastery checklist. And if you attend the next webinar, that mastery course, you may potentially be getting it for free. You'll have a chance to win it for free. Now, I got another question I want to quickly answer before the end of this webinar, which basically says, do you recommend a gap year for people who do not have enough extracurriculars or volunteer experiences? And the answer is yes. Gap years are super important. I think a very crucial part. They can help you make money. They can help you fine tune what you want to do when you go to college. They can help you take classes so that you can offset and mitigate a poor score. They can help you really kind of clean up your profile so you can have an even more unique profile that is aimed at an area of interest. It allows you to gain experience that, again, you can use as part of your story so that you can apply to schools. What you don't want to do is take a gap year and do nothing, or do a gap year and squander it doing something that's really menial. You really want to do something that really allows you to stand out and allows you to write about it in your applications. Now, the alternative to a gap year is going to community college, where it's cheaper, and then you can get into a top school if you do really well. But I think a gap year, what we like to call a path year, because it really allows you to kind of reconsider and put yourself on a much more profound path towards success. All right. I think with that, we will end it unless there's any other questions. Nope, that's pretty much it. So thanks, guys. Make sure to tune in next week, same time, same place. We're going to go through probably the most important part of the process. And again, if you want to get a jump start, go take a look at our mastery course by going online to collegeadmissionsmasterycourse.com and getting that course. Or also, if you apply within the next 24 hours, we'll give you 25% off your course. All right, guys, thanks so much. And I will see you guys next week.